So today we're kind of combining forces here. We're taking algebra and things that we've talked about with algebra and combining it with the angle relationships. So you'll find out very quickly that if you don't know these angle relationships and don't know the vocabulary and can't name them, you're going to have a really hard time with the algebra piece. So please continue studying the vocabulary, being ready and understanding whether we're talking about congruent angles or supplementary angles. So for the sheet in front of you, here's example number 1. And the directions at the top say to first identify the angle relationship and then solve for x. So looking here at example 1, I'm trying to determine what is the relationship between the two angles. And I see that we are dealing with same side. They are on the same side of the line, and they are exterior. So I'm going to write same side exterior. And then the question is that relationship, are those angles congruent or supplementary? And again, that's just something you kind of got to know looking at the sample. In this case, we're dealing with supplementary. I want you to write both of these pieces of information. What's the relationship, and does that mean congruent or supplementary? Because that's your starting piece for the algebra. Supplementary means that the angles equal 180 degrees. So if the angle relationship is supplementary, you know that these two angles, when we add them together, need to equal 180 degrees. And so that's where we start, kind of like what we were doing with the triangles. I'm going to write 100, which is the measure of angle 1, plus x plus 10. All of that equals 180 because they have a supplementary relationship. And then from here, you just get to simplify and go through the process of solving the equation. We can combine terms. 100 plus 10 is 110, plus x equals 180. So if we get x by itself, we have to circle the variable, draw your line. We're subtracting 110 from both sides, and we see that x equals 70 degrees. So that is what x equals. If the question asked you to find the measure of the missing angle, you would just have to plug it back in there, but for the purpose of today, we are just solving for x. So looking at example number 2, right next door, again, step number 1 is to identify the relationship between the two angles. So I see here again, these angles are on the same side, but this time they are interior angles. And because I know my vocabulary, I know that same side interior angles are supplementary, which is again the starting point for solving these algebra problems. Knowing that the angles are supplementary means that together they need to equal 180 degrees. So that is our starting point. I'm going to write out my angles. I've got 132 degrees plus the angle that says 3x plus 9. That needs to equal 180 since these are supplementary angles. And again, from here on out, I don't really need to go through this process anymore because we should be masters at it. We're combining like terms. I've got 141 plus 3x equals 180. I want to get my x alone, so I'm circling that and whatever is with it to get rid of what's in the way first. So in this case, I got to get rid of that 141. It leaves me with my 3x still equals 39 degrees. But now I just want the x, so I divide both sides by 3, and I get x equals 13 degrees. So I'm going to put that here on my chart. Again, x equals 13. So really the key is you've got to know these relationships. That's where we're starting. Are they supplementary? And if so, you're just adding them together and setting them equal to 180 like we did with the triangles. So what I'd like you to do is I want you to try example number 3. If you're looking here at our angle relationship, you see these two together make a straight line, which automatically clues you that these are supplementary. So with that setup, I want you to try solving this one on your own, and then check back in and see if you got the correct answer. So pause the video and give it a shot. If you set everything up, you were just combining these angles, setting them equal to 180. Really the signs is the most important thing at this point because we have 6x minus 1 and we have a positive, or we're adding it to 121. So when we combine those, we now have 6x plus 120 equals 180. So if you made that mistake, go back and correct that now, please. I'll be looking for that. And then you can go through and solve the equation. We first got to get the x term by itself, so we get 6x equals 60. Divide both sides by 6. You should have gotten that x equals 10 degrees. So moving on to example number 4, again, we're starting with the angle relationship. In this case, these two angles are exterior angles and they are alternate. So I'm going to just abbreviate alternate exterior angles. And again, knowing my vocabulary, I know that alternate exterior angles are congruent. That's what's written on my card. They are equal to each other. If you think back to our pattern, and we labeled this angle 1, and we went all the way through, and this was angle 8, the pattern was that these two angles were the same thing. So when the angle relationship is congruent, that means that you just get to set the two pieces equal to each other. Congruent means equal, so there's no 180 degrees involved. Rather, these two angles are equal to each other. So I put an equal sign in between them. I solve for x. In this case, a pretty easy introduction. We just have to divide both sides by 8, and we get that x equals 8 degrees. So the difference is just that congruent angles mean they're equal to each other, not to 180 degrees, and so that's how you'll set it up. Example number 5, they tried to trick you by turning the parallel lines, but keep in mind here that this is the parallel line and this is the parallel line. That's the lines that matter. So again, these angles are inside, or interior angles inside the parallel lines, and they're on alternate sides of that transversal line through the center. So because of that, alternate interior angles, I know because of my vocab, are congruent, which means again in this case I can just set these two angles equal to each other. 135 equals x plus 15. And then when I go through and solve, trying to get my x by itself, all I got to do is subtract 15 from both sides, and I get that x equals 120 degrees. So I want you to go ahead and I want you to try example number 6. Identify what the relationship is, and then do exactly what it says or what that means. I'll start you off. These angles, they're not both on the inside, they're not both on the outside. When that is the clue, this relationship is corresponding, and that is one of the toughest ones, I think, when I'm looking at them. It's just hard to see that, but these are the angles that you can just drag right on top of each other, and they would be the same. So because they're the same, we know that corresponding angles are congruent. So with that in mind, I'd like you to pause the video, and I want you to solve for x. So since these angles were congruent, your first step should have been to set them equal to each other, and then go through the process of solving for x. I'm circling the term with my x, and then I'm going to get it by itself by getting rid of the other number first. I see a minus 4, so to undo that I add 4, giving me 8x equals 96. And then to get that x alone, I have to divide both sides by 8, giving me x equals 96 divided by 8 is 12. So 12 degrees there for your final answer. With that being said, this really comes down to, are my angles congruent or supplementary, so that I know how to set up that initial equation. These next two relationships, we have example number 7. I want you to start and first identify the relationship. These angles are across from each other, so what does that mean? What do we call them? And are they congruent or supplementary? That'll help you out to start. And then the same thing here for example number 8. Identify the relationship to help you set up. These two questions will serve as your check-in, so once you complete questions number 7 and question number 8, and please show me all of your work, you can come check in with me. We'll go over it, make sure that we're on the same page, and then I will give you your class assignment that will need to be finished for homework.